Welcome to our first Poemalogues. I am Dasha Kelly Hamilton. I am the Milwaukee Poet Laureate and a creative change agent, and just excited to be talking to some other humans inside of our Rona vacation. But the Poemalogues actually was something set in place many months ago as an opportunity to gather folks together and to have conversations about the life in between our lines. So the way that these will work is we have these broken into 4 different conversations. There's freedom, body, power, and place. And I'm going to start a little bit with how I came about coming to the poem that I'd like to share, but it's even not about the poem. Poemalogues are an opportunity for us to talk to each other. There are 1,000 million gajillion different poems, and they cover 1,000 million gajillion different life experiences and thoughts, just the way we do, just the way we live. So it's finding those conversations, and I'm sure there's a poem that'll match, but it's really about a place to start. So in getting started, the video that we played at the beginning to prepare for this asked folks to tell me what's the first image that came to their mind when they heard the word freedom. And taking those images, put those together and aligned some poetic words to their pictures, because pictures are worth 1,000 words. So you're already a poet, by the way, because we think in images. So I thought of a bicycle. So bicycles was my first thought in thinking of freedom, the picture of a kid whizzing down a hill with no care, no bills, no charges, just summertime or spring break and the wind in their face. And the idea of commuters who are willing to jump on a bike and get from here to work. I watch them, and I'm not the best person to share the road. My husband points that out to me, but I try to be more mindful of it. But they are detached from fare boxes and traffic jams, and they're going in between where the cars can't go. That's a freedom. And I started to think about women. And bicycles. I had this research project for the show that I have called Making Cake, and I learned about the social significance of when women were able to ride bicycles. And it showed up again most recently in the Netflix film of Self-Made, that scene where CJ Walker was riding the bicycle. Also, I was able to know the point of the status and the emblem of that because it is research. So all of that rambling and all of that research and all of those thoughts started with freedom, had me searching for a bicycle poem, and I ended up with a poem about love. And I'll share it with you at the end. So in the same mindset, that's how we're going to move forward, about just giving a story about your ideas, and we'll work in the poems when we can. So our first guest in terms of this conversation is today we are talking about freedom is Miss Laura Bassoli. I'm going to cue you in. Hello, Laura. I'm going to need you. Oh, I have you muted. I'm sorry. That's my fault. We were doing all these tech things and she had it worked out and then I goofed it up in the end. Thank you for being here. So you are joining us all the way from Italy.
Yes, from Reggio Emilia.
Say that again.
Reggio Emilia.
Reggio Emilia.
Yes.
Florence was so much easier.
A small town called Correggio.
Correggio. So tell us a bit about tell me what did we interrupt? What did you stop doing to make time for this conversation today, just this moment?
I stopped quarantine. That's what I did.
Are you, well, the way you guys have it going, is there stopping quarantine? Is that such a thing?
No. There's really at the moment no light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of gossip. There's a lot of opinions. It was supposed to have ended, I believe. The kids were supposed to have gone to school Friday. But then now they say maybe the end of May.
And this started for you all when?
About the second week of February. The second week of February. And that's why when you talk about freedom, you don't realize how precious it is until you don't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, since we haven't had it for a while, I found myself thinking, where do I go to find it? I can't, I can't go wander off. I can't take off on my bike and go biking around. I can't get in my car and go driving around.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go on a trip. So where do I have to start digging deep, deep, deep. And where do I start?
When did it move from being inconvenienced and irritated to really being a question about not feeling free? Don't get me wrong. As a kid, any weekend you weren't allowed to go outside, it felt like all of your freedoms were taken away. But it's temporary. So when did it start to feel like a question of freedom for you?
From the beginning.
Okay.
From the beginning. Well, okay. When it had been a while since I had gone to the grocery store. But when I went to the grocery store and they were telling us you have to put on masks and you have to wear gloves and they're giving us alcohol to wipe down our carts, taking our temperatures, and only letting in a certain amount of people at a time, that's when I think it really hit me. But it was from the very beginning. It was hard. It was odd. Even leaving the house, you felt almost like a criminal. Like you had to put a big cape over your face just to walk down the street. You didn't want to be noticed. You wanted to almost become invisible because even suddenly people around you are looking at you strange. And God forbid you sneeze. So, because allergies happen too.
Oh, that's a real thing. Oh, especially if you're going from February over those spring months. So we're just here in Milwaukee anyway. We're at the beginning of that reality. So that tension of trying to hold on to our rights, and they're making the initial threats of arresting people who are found outside. So then so we're all as a person of color already expecting it to be biased and worse than the way things are. Someone who's able to come and go freely. I mean, freedom can be such an abstract thing until it's taken from you. And there's a difference from you're being inconvenienced or you don't have permission. I mean, I know technically that's an effect of freedom too, but how have you been able, is it more empathy? Are you more frustrated? Or I know we can make a list of, yeah, go ahead.
It's exactly that. I'm not, I actually am more of a, it wasn't so drastic. I suffer as anybody would, but because I'm actually more of an introverted person, I could hang around and I could busy myself one way or another. But you feel it. You feel this oppression. And that was tough. It was a little bit too much. It rocked the boat a little bit too much for me. And so, even images of freedom, I can't think of, I don't even want to, at the very beginning, I didn't want to think about vacation and going to my happy place, thinking of the future. So I decided I have to start digging. I have to start digging because I'm not going to be a victim. I refuse, absolutely. And so I kind of started realizing I need guides. And I thought, who have I read about? Who have I seen? Who have I known in my life? I've known of in my life who's been in a situation similar as this. And so, of course, the first thing I thought was Nelson Mandela.
Yes, you did.
So that's why I chose Invictus, because in Latin, Invictus means uncomfortable. And so I decided I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm not going to let this conquer me. And in deciding that, that's where my freedom just kind of it bubbled up. So it just came. It's just an internal freedom that just blossomed.
At the moment you decided that this isn't going to conquer me, or at the moment you found something to tell me where that I definitely understand. I point to my heart when I say I understand. So I understand what you're saying, but if you can talk a little bit more.
I found my guides, you know, and the first person was Nelson Mandela. And I tried to, and I started reading more about, you know, his experiences while he was in his cell for so long, and the things that he did to keep himself, oh gosh, just to keep his spirit alive every day, and then that just went on to other things, other people. And I started thinking of people like, you know, Stephen Hawking. He wasn't in a jail cell, but he was trapped inside of his own body. But these are individuals that you can never tell them that they weren't free, because they have found freedom inside themselves. And that's the freedom that I try to have every single day. I try to find the freedom that I have inside of myself to keep the walls from not closing in.
Wow. I'm taking all of that in. So it's one of those moments where you know that there's freedom of self and freedom in your thoughts, and even having access to it right here. We don't always go here first because situations don't always take us here first. And with a little bit of more work, hopefully that'll definitely be a go-to. Before you share the piece, can you give us a bit of who are you? Like, give me your whole life story in like a minute. Okay, 90 seconds.
Okay, born and bred U.S. Army. Was happy to have known Dasha Kelly Hamilton in high school. Yeah, Harmony Express.
Harmony Express.
And then I was living in El Paso, Texas, and I met this young Italian soldier, and I married military. And so I was born military, married military. That's now I live in Italy, except for the difference was I was born in the U.S. Army and I married the Italian Army.
all the uniform pictures.
God, I'm done. That's it. So I live in Reggio Emilia. I lived the past 15 years in Florence, Italy, and we've just moved back to the country because of my husband's mother, who's elderly, and she needs some company. And so I have two daughters, Joya and Matilde, and they're the loves of my life.
Even during these last 4 months?
Yeah. You know, you have to live for something, no?
That's right.
And yeah, that's it.
That's it. That's the everything. That is the everything.
That's everything. Yeah.
If you
know, as Army kids, if I start, you know, repeating my whole life, I'd have to say, well, I was born in El Paso, and then we lived in Hawaii, and then we moved to California, and then we were in Fort Polk, and then we went to
and at that point their eyes are glazed over going, what is this life she's talking about? It's a thing.
So, I know, you have to live it to get it, but
most excellent. Well, let's do this. I'd love to have you share the piece, especially knowing that it was a guide that's getting you through what may be a release or not. But certainly a voice that we can all celebrate and appreciate. So please share with us what you came up with for your freedom poem.
Okay. I chose Invictus, and I'll say it as you say it in Latin, Invictus, by William Ernest Henley. It was written in the 18th century. And it goes like this. Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horrors of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matter not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your bit of freedom. So if you can hold tight for me, we have our next guest. We're going to chat a bit. So we're going to take her take on freedom, and we'll come back to you shortly.
Wonderful.
So thank you. Coming into the screen now, we have Miss Dynasty Ceasar. Dynasty, how are you, Miss Lady?
I'm well. I'm well, hanging in there. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hanging in there. I guess that is the game plan these days. So, in the midst of your bustling quarantine schedule, what were you in the moment of?
I went for a bike ride today. So that was really nice. I haven't had time to do that in ages.
Okay. But are you getting outside in general, or so is the bike ride new, or being outside something that's you haven't given yourself to do?
Bike riding is new. I like to go for a walk, but bike riding is just like, okay, I've got to carry this bike outside. I've got to. So, yeah. It's not that much, but it is when you live on the second floor, right?
I admire the bicycle folks. It's a big question mark on my face when I see it happening. Much like when I see people jogging in the rain.
Yep.
In general, right? So Dynasty, tell me a little bit. Tell me your whole life story.
Oh my gosh, my life story. Mm-hmm. I have 90 seconds too, right?
Yes.
Okay. I was born and raised in Milwaukee. This is my favorite city. I've never lived in. See, what else? I like long walks to the park. No, just kidding. No, I love to check on the community. So my favorite thing to do, my favorite neighborhood is Lindsay Heights. I've been really dedicated to making sure that the residents in Lindsay Heights are taken care of.
Hey, Dynasty. I'm sorry to interrupt you. If I can ask you to plug your earbuds in, after all. We have someone who shot us a note.
Is this better?
I'm going to say yes, it sounds fine to me, but someone sent us a message that they're getting a bit of feedback, so let's just plug them in just in case.
Okay. Is that better? I hope so. So yes, born and raised in Milwaukee. My favorite neighborhood in Milwaukee is Lindsay Heights. Right now, I am the racial justice trainer at the YWCA Southeast Wisconsin. And I really focus on trying to educate folks on what racism is and how it affects people of color, but also how it affects the lives of white people too.
Because that is a thing.
It is. It truly is.
Looking into the camera, it's a thing. We are all dealing with racism. So it's real. Exactly. So that has to be, So on one hand, you're in the fight, but on the other hand, there's some relief in this relief. So I'd imagine in your day-to-day. So in doing that work digitally, how is that translating? Because that's a lot of eyeball to eyeball, feeling people's energy. You know what I mean? Because I've been in those conversations, and one for them to know that you are educating and not attacking. Because the words on the page, these are complicated discussions that don't have to be, but for every reason we understand, they are. So please, how are you doing that online in this digital space?
I think it's going pretty well. My co-facilitator and the racial justice director and I are both really good at working through it together. We actually just did our first in-house training with me operating Zoom. It was actually yesterday, and I think it went pretty well. I was behind the scenes kind of in terms of people weren't able to see me because I was working the Zoom conference. So I guess that part, I haven't really felt that out yet. But it is. I think it is when you can see someone and they're like kind of in your space, right? Digitally, it is.
I'm looking at all your decorations, right?
Don't look. Just kidding.
Very cool.
But no, it is different. It definitely is different, but it definitely forces me to make sure I'm on my A game and I'm saying what I feel, but making sure that this is not saying what I feel too. So.
Oh, the poker face or the real face.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, excellent. Well, thank you for that. I wanted to, and that's takes us right into this topic is perfect, I suppose. So there are all these different angles and admissions and curiosities about the idea of freedom. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on freedom.
So, I struggle with the concept of freedom because oftentimes when we talk about freedom, we talk about it from a physical aspect. And there are people who are like, well, freedom's in the mind. But I think freedom also exists in perception. So if you have the power over how you perceive yourself and also how others perceive you, because I think who you are and who you're defined also by how others see you. So it's 50-50. It's who you think you are and then who others think you are. And then it's a mesh of that. And I think freedom is really having the control over what you see yourself as and how other people see you, because that's truly who you want to be and who you say you are. And so for me, I don't know if that's really something that's attainable. Like, how do you really get things on the same page that way? But then control over yourself and relinquishing that thought that you may have control over other people, and that controlling your own narrative means that you're controlling other folks. Because I think it's something, I think it's really, I think it's dreadful to have control over other people. It's taxing and you have responsibility over other folks. This is coming from someone who doesn't have kids. So.
Yeah. But even with that, as a parent, you're responsible for that child. But that's another challenge too. You being responsible for this other human as opposed to controlling them. That branches off into a different conversation later in life too. But I'm definitely following what you're saying.
So yeah, I think just having freedom exists in having control over your own narrative, and that's what you.
What's interesting to me from that comment is when you think about the things that you choose to do or think or believe or not, like you're saying, that freedom of your own thought, but the fact that you have constructs, you have other people's definitions, right, wrong, or misinformed, or on the point that we absorb and we adopt and we pick them up. So I'm thinking about that where to Laura's description, you are literally contained in a house, or you're contained, or someone's incarcerated, or you're not able to ... And in some cases, people are not able, right? They either are not capable because they've not been invited to, or they're not invited to, but they're not able to imagine themselves in other places or imagine scenarios to be different than what they are. So that defining your own narrative, and so even having that narrative, and you're fighting against a bigger story, not that any story is bigger than you, but it's got more mass behind it, right? How to find, and I guess maybe that's why you are questioning not the merit of freedom, but what it really means. Because if I'm free to be who I am, but the rest of the world doesn't see me who I am, I'm still free. Am I? What do you? Is that a conflict, or is?
Hmm. Yeah. And when you talk about like being in the house, I was thinking about that. Like when we get freedom to go outside of our houses, will we really feel safe? And will we really, how long will it take for us to feel safe in stores? And how long will we go on feeling like if someone coughs in a store, should we be uncomfortable about that? And I think we'll still be housed in our
Mm-hmm.
brain, in terms of, is it okay for me to be in this space? And so that's why, I don't know, I just really struggle with this concept of freedom. It's just like, is it real? I
Let me
mean,
ask you, would you consider yourself a free person?
mm, I think I'm free in some aspects, but completely free? No, no. I don't even think, I don't think I know what that looks like. I don't think any of us really know what freedom looks like. And that's, that's not only limited to like perceptions, but also like with real tangible things. If we look at the laws and things that are in place, are you actually free, or are you abiding by someone else's rules? And what does freedom actually look like for you? What does that feel like? I don't think we know what that feels like because we've never had that option. We've always had someone telling us what to do.
So what would be, what do you think should be not should be, that's not fair. What is a different ambition or replacement language? Maybe the destination isn't freedom anymore. So similarly, when people were reminded, no one can be perfect. No one can be perfect because mortals are imperfect, and we know it, and we don't know it, and we know it. I'm just curious, especially with the work that you do, with the things that you pointed out about your perception versus reality, and what should we be striving for if not freedom? If it's this intangible abstraction that doesn't really mean anything, what should be our language? Our,
I don't know what the word is to say that I don't have the word, but I can say that we experience conditions of freedom in some points of our lives, but we just haven't been free. We haven't really been free. So I don't know what would be a good word for that. I think it's just saying that we've experienced conditions or moments, like I guess when we talk about privilege, and when folks will talk about monetary things as being like, well, that's white privilege. Well, no, that's a piece of white privilege, but that's not the entirety of it. So like we talk about freedom, okay, that's a piece of, being free, but that's not the entirety of it. So I guess I'd just say like I've experienced a part of,
yeah.
I've had a little piece of candy out of the chocolate box, just not the whole box.
You know what? Some of those chocolates, you don't want them anyway. It's got nougat and stuff in it. You don't want that. You don't want that. So let's do this. I would love for you to tell us a little bit then about how this landed you to your poem, and
Okay.
we'll hear it. And while she's getting set for that, I want to let the folks know, and I've not done this before. I hope this is how this goes. I've definitely watched my bonus daughter practice her not YouTube show for many, many summers. But you can make a comment and join our conversation. So you can comment from whichever YouTube or platform that you're watching this from. It'll show up to us here. We'll add it to our discussion. But when we come after Dynasty's poem, it's not her poem, but if she shares a poem that she found, we'll come back and talk a little bit more. I think that was my commercial. I think I did it.
You did a good job. It was a good commercial. So the poem that I chose, I think it really stuck out to me because it used my favorite word, and it's human. And I think when we talk about anything, any condition of being a human being, we all see things differently when we have different experiences. And how we exercise our humanity is ultimately how we exercise our freedom to a certain degree. And so that's why I chose this poem. All right. So, and I don't have a poet's voice, so be ready for this,
We
people.
don't
Be
need that.
ready. No? Okay. So the poem is called Perhaps the World Ends Here by Joy HARJO. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies, and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves and as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite.
Ooh, wait.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. It may end there. We may do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me toggle a bit and bring Miss Laura back.
That was beautiful.
So here we are. So just kind of taking a deep breath in. We did it, right? And a lot of this has been in the invitation is letting folks know, no, 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 no. You do not need to be a poetry expert. No, 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 no. Even if you are a poet, we are not going to analyze these poems. That's a whole different channel for a whole different endeavor. Really just about thoughts and ideas and conversations. And because I know how it can feel where you are just having the same conversation over again. Or I know sometimes I feel like everything I know is just old. Everything I know is everything I know. So I know how much feeding each other discussion, it can be so rich. Whether I remember all of it or not, I have this whole heart human space, and you've definitely fed me some different things to consider. So with the same note, wanted to have us be in discussion. So it's not me interviewing, it's the three of us. So something, Laura, that you heard from Dynasty, something you wanted to say. Everything counts. What are your thoughts? Some feedback.
It was a beautiful poem. It was really beautiful. And it just sums up everything. And we're also a family who believe that everything happens at the dinner table. We sit down, we have our meals together, and I think that most families, if they can, at least once a week, they should. Absolutely. So,
What about the yes? And I'm curious about, because both of you were describing this physical versus a mental, and it really had an overlap. You know, you were both sharing the same concerns and heart space, and that you both described this oppression of not being able to. So it's the same, but not at all. So just any other thoughts or thing that came up when you heard the other or talking about freedom, or another thought that came up just in hearing some of these different ideas popped up. Like, I love the kitchen table too. You're right. So having that opportunity to have your family around this table, this box, this crate, whatever it is. And the point of the poem is all of the life that we have in common.
And when you're at the table, you just form your own little world, no?
Mm-hmm.
And you just block everything out. When you're with family, it's like everything else going on around just ceases to exist, because you're there, and no matter what you're talking about, or whatever you're eating, becomes just as important as the players around the table, the family, the friends. Everything else is just blocked, and just this protection that covers you, umbrellas you.
Mm.
These are just
Our quarantine bubbles.
wow. As long, not that we, well, because it's so and I'm always worried about talking too much about this, because we've been going through it, and I'm so envious that Dynasty, you went out for a bike ride today. I would love, I did also kind of on a stationary bike in the garden. But oh God, I've already forgot what I was talking about. I'm sorry. Dynasty, Dasha, talk. It's midnight here.
You were about to talk about that she was able to jump on her bike and you wouldn't. If you can talk a little bit, the fines. I mean, the patrol is real. So again, we're at the very beginning. I mean, literally just 3 days ago, Dynasty, we had a official say now that they're threatening to, and we're like, yeah. So what does that look like, Laura?
Yeah, no bikes are allowed. 0.
So you said they gave you tickets and patrols.
Yeah, 4,000 euros.
How much is that in US dollars?
What? 3? Yeah, $4,500.
For being outside?
Yes, absolutely. Or you can go to jail.
Oh,
if you don't have,
Either or.
Wait.
If you don't have the money, just back them up.
First, you may leave your house for work if you're still working outside. For example, if you work in a hospital, for health reasons, because you're going to the hospital or the pharmacy. And I forgot the other one. And for another reason, I've already forgotten. Oh, and it has to be absolutely for something necessary. Yeah, like groceries. Like the grocery stores are all open. Anything that sells food is open.
hey.
Oh, and the newsstand. So if you want to buy a newspaper or a magazine, those are all open.
That's essential. What about the liquor stores? They're leaving our liquor stores open still.
No.
Yeah, they are.
Wait. They deliver, because we have
Look,
cantina.
Good.
We
That's cool.
in fact, my husband, he ordered a couple of boxes of wine, which are very useful sitting around that table sometimes.
Yep.
I someone, they had a post recently said, okay, this is the second time this week I've gone out to get liquor for 2 weeks. This is the second time It's a lot sitting around.
Yeah, you order it. No, those are the only reasons why you should be leaving. And when you do leave, if you are stopped by the police or the military police, who are called the carabinieri, you have to have a justification, a legal justification that you can print. And you sign it saying, I'm going to the doctor's. I need to have my teeth. Well, actually, the dentists are closed, I think. But
Look at Dynasty.
So these are things that we have to do. And for us here, it's become very normal. They're not things that scare us anymore. At first, it was like, but it's become normal.
Any
However,
tips?
These are things. But for me, I think, like I said before, I've learned how to deal with it better, because I found my guides. The people who physically haven't been able to move or couldn't, because they were, like I mentioned, Stephen Hawking, and other people who by some means or another are trapped. But the whole story, the topic of the table is so much nicer. That beautiful idea of family and friends sitting around, and see, that is freedom too. the freedom of being able to invite your friends over to come over for a nice glass of wine. Oh, I miss that too.
Yeah, I don't know how long these virtual happy hours are going to last. Dynasty, you were going to say something?
Yeah. Um, I really appreciate that you shared some things about Italy. I think this pandemic has really, for me, reminded me and a lot of folks, I hope this person broken up, right? And that the world is a puzzle piece. And it's not, we're literally connected. We're all in the same, circle. So like this perception that like, oh no, that's happening over there. And that's not going to happen here. And then here we are, Wisconsin is, oh my goodness, we need to close the news every day. I know you watch the news, you read, and businesses are slowly closing up, and ordinances or order have done this a long time. But we just, and this isn't a Wisconsin thing. This is just assume that we're on separate parts of the earth, and so we're not. Oh, we think that we're on Saturn, and oh no, folks in Italy, they're on Earth, and we're
over there.
Yeah. Well, we had that also when it was happening in China. We're like, it's happening in China. It's not going to happen to us. And then they closed literally Lombardy, and then Emilia Romagna, where we live, then Veneto, and suddenly they closed the regions, which are like our states. And then they close, you can't leave your states, you can't leave your cities, you can't leave your county, and now you can't leave your house anymore. So basically what you're talking about is we're at the beginning. It's like an echo, but we're at the beginning of the echo, and you guys are a little bit farther out of the echo until it whirls around and
like you said, we're all on the same sphere.
Yeah.
Dynasty, we're all on the same sphere.
Dynasty, you're right.
I am looking to see if there's any commentary. I don't see anything coming through, and it could also be that I just don't know how to drive this thing yet. But one comment came through, so I was able to respond. So I think I have those basics down. But I wanted to be mindful of the time, and I wanted to leave space for any other. And again, random is great. If there are any other lingering thoughts or anything else that you want to share that you left on the table, or a question you want to bring back to either of us, while I see your brains are working, let everyone know. So we'll be back next week, and next week we're going to talk about power. What does your mind think of? What's the first image that comes to your mind when you hear the word power? So we'll be collecting poems. We'll be collecting conversations. If you'd like to be a part of this chat, just shoot a message in all the places where you can send me a message. What else I want to have? If you have a poem to share, please send that to poems@theretreatmke.com. So what will happen is we're going to collect these poems, and at the end of this series, we'll have a people's anthology. So there'll be the Joy HARJO piece, there'll be the Invictus, I try to say it Latin, Invictus, included in that as well, and all the other published pieces that you all share. And this will be our, you see where this is going? Poemalogue about these different topics. And we'll also have these other published works just to celebrate on the poetry end of things. But this was about conversation. This was about finding ourselves on one axis and see where everything leads. Anything you'd like to close out? Any lingering thoughts on freedom? Wisdom to the people? Mana to the masses?
No, I just want to thank you all for inviting me. I've enjoyed this so much, spending time with you. This is the first time I've actually been social with anyone other than my family. So I am having
You can still do it.
like ladies.
You still got it.
Dynasty, you probably think those girls are crazy. We're not
No,
girls, we are women. We are.
that's right.
Girls at heart for sure.
hmm Yeah, I really appreciate this too. I think this is new for me. I don't read poems out loud, so I really appreciate being pushed.
See how easy it
You know,
was?
and mhm. And to talk about something that I don't oftentimes get to talk about, and if I do, it's with folks that I'm like, people that we have the same conversations all the time. So it's good to hear new perspectives and be pushed. So thank you for that.
Excellent, most excellent. Thank you both for joining me and sharing your stories too. For everyone else, I'm going to close out with the piece that I started with. Again, when I thought of freedom, the first image that came to my mind was a bicycle. And I put in bicycle poems in the search engine and just started picking through the ones that kind of matched the things that I thought were interesting about freedom and a bicycle. And I didn't land it where I did not land where I thought I would, but I landed where I was supposed to. By Emily Alexander, this is A Few Things, a Bicycle, and a Love Poem. And too often I count each loss like teeth tumbling out of my mouth, rattled by the roar of every heavy body, all the things we can somehow keep, the siren call, the carcass in the gutter, the woman crying in her car, how far these fields reach towards empty streets. I want to be pressed against your neck, spine unclenched. Some nights I ride my bicycle across town and learn leaving and learn to hold. And the stars sway and catch on my bicycle chain and the vines between our houses over roads while windows fill with light and its lovers come home to flick their fingers on switches and spines. Some things are small enough to carry, like the hum of your mouth, the hum of my tires on cement, and my cold breath opening and closing the doors of my lungs so carefully. Thank you all. Poems every day. It's called A Heartbeat, and we'll see you next week at 4:30 for another Poemalogue.
Buonasera a tutti.